Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. Art Burns here, you there. Hope you're as excited as I am to hear what I have to talk about today because you know what? There's some really cool stuff that I want to talk about today. I want to talk about happiness. Now, who doesn't want to talk about happiness, right? And it's not the kind of happiness that, so happiness is a very complicated thing. It really is. It's much more complicated than I ever thought it would be, right? But let's just suffice to say, and I've talked about happiness in the past. You can look back at some of the previous episodes I've done about like the science of happiness and the different levels of happiness and sustainability of happiness and all that stuff. Go check that out, okay? But today I want to talk about something a little bit different, right? So when we say happiness, right, we think of, a lot of times what comes to mind is we think of a temporary mood, right? Like a temporary state of being, right? I'm happy right now, right? And so but the thing is that and yeah, happiness does go that way, right? Like I might be happy after getting a call from an old friend that I haven't talked to in a long time, right? So I might just have a temporary state of happiness that came from that pardon me, from that experience, right? Which is great, right? I could also get happiness from eating a vegan ice cream cone, or eating a delicious meal, or just kind of looking out at a beautiful sunset. I might feel a moment of happiness that way, right? But the thing is that happiness, so there's that sort of, transient level of happiness, right? Which is that sort of, that first level of happiness that I talk about. I told you to go look at another video about, right? Well, so what that is just the sense of at any given time that you are feeling more positive emotions than you are feeling negative emotions. Well, then that's technically happy, right? That's technically a level of happiness, right? But it's a very, very fickle and very unsustainable level of happiness, right? It's the happiness that, like, if I'm eating a vegan ice cream cone, the vegan ice cream cone is making me happy. And then what happens if I drop the ice cream off the cone? Now I'm unhappy, right? Because now the thing that was making me happy is now gone, or it's, on the street and some dog is over there licking at it. So it's over, right? So therefore my happiness must be over, right? But that's the thing, right? Happiness. So we could look at happiness as this, again, this sort of transient, very temporary, momentary kind of emotion, this sort of mood, if you will, right? Or we could look at happiness in a little bit of a different way, right? We could look at happiness as, instead of the happiness itself, we can look at creating the conditions for happiness, or the conditions in which happiness can thrive, right? And I know it seems like a subtle difference, but it's actually pretty important to understand this. So let's unpack this a little bit, right? So there's a guy named Matthew Richard who is he's a Buddhist monk. He grew up as a scientist. He went to the Pasteur Institute in France, which is like our most prestigious, like I guess MIT for science, or Caltech or something like that, like the cream of the crop, right? That's where he went to school to study. I think it was nuclear engineering, I believe, or some like very heavy duty science stuff, right? And after he graduated with a PhD, he decided to become a Tibetan monk. I always make the joke at this point that his parents must have been just thrilled, but the thing is, though, so he has this very scientific and monastic background, right? Which makes him a very, very interesting person to talk to about something like happiness, right? And so he actually was, and I know I've told you this story before, so pardon me for repeating this in case anybody hasn't heard this. So Matthew Richard was one of about 15 monks that came to the United States in the early 90s to undergo some testing with our fancy, MRI machines and the, all the different ways in which we had to test and to measure and to examine psychological, realities, right, of people, right? So we tested their attention, their attentional blink. We tested their reflex reaction. And I say we, because like I'm Rich Davidson's buddy, but the wonderful scientists tested them in all these different areas, right? And one of the things that Matthew Richard, when they put him in the MRI, they saw that even just at a baseline, he wasn't even doing anything. He was just sitting there. Most people, when they're sitting there, the default mode network is very active, and it's very, that's the place where we're thinking about ourselves and how, what problems we might have in our lives. That's what most people do in those situations, right? Before they're given instruction, the activity of the brain is like raging, and it's very in that midline area of where the default mode network lies. You can look that up too in an old video if you want. But what they found with Matthew Richard was that it was not this midline craziness that was going on. His activity was in the areas that they have identified, mostly in the left prefrontal cortex. That's where we feel good. That's where, like, when we're happy, that's where the activity is. So as a baseline, before this guy was even asked to do anything, he was already in this, like, what the scientists were saying, this guy must be feeling this euphoric sense of happiness right now. And they were just blown away by this. So they actually coined him or named him, dubbed him the happiest man in the world, which apparently he didn't like that for whatever reason. But anyway, at some point somebody asked him, like, okay, so does that mean that you never get unhappy? Right? If you're always just, if this is your baseline of happiness, then do you ever get unhappy? And his answer was really beautiful. Right? His answer was that, yeah, of course, when I look at, the suffering that I see in the world, I feel a tremendous level of unhappiness and sadness and difficulty with that, right? But the thing is that my happiness is my natural state to which I return, right? He described it as a deep ocean of well-being that cultivates the conditions for happiness. Okay? And so what he goes on to say is that this happiness, this conditions for happiness to exist or arise, is based on, and this is really important, okay? It's based on the subtle understanding of how the mind works. Okay, now that's important. Okay, because, again, happiness is not something that we need to come in from the outside, but it's also not something where we're just saying, hey, put on a happy face, turn that frown upside down, you young man, let's go. That's not what we're doing either, right? That's not the point. Because if we just get to that point, then that's the same thing, right? And then if we turn on the news, it's like, oh my gosh, look at all these people in the hurricane that just lost all their homes. And, then we'll be crushed. Right? Now, again, looking at the people losing their homes in a hurricane is always going to feel sad, right? But but getting back to what Dr. Richard says is that it's about the awareness, right? It's about the awareness of how the mind operates. And the reason why that's so important, right? Or the reason why that works is because as we develop that deeper awareness of what we react to, of how we react to what we react to, of how our mind processes the energy and the information flow that comes from within and from outside of us, when we get a real clear understanding, real clear awareness of how that all works, well, then what we do is we realize that a lot of the times that we're feeling sad, it's because of something we've experienced, right? It's because of phenomena that has arisen, right? That's what they always talk about in Buddhist circles, right? Is that everything is a phenomena, right? Because we don't know, or phenomenon, pardon me. We don't, it's not like life is a phenomenon. right? It really is. It really is. Like, the fact that we have so many different people in the world, each of us with our own mind, processing our own stuff, our own emotions, our own everything. And then we're interacting with each other and we're impacting each of our, it is a phenomenon. It's an absolute phenomenon. And so as we cultivate a deeper sense of awareness of, number one, that it is a phenomenon, that it is just this chaotic, mayhem of a world that we live in, right? It's completely unpredictable, even though it is predictable. It's completely chaotic, even though it is organized. It's all of it, right? Like John Kabat-Zinn calls it, it's the full catastrophe. Right? And it's everything. It's the good and the positive and the negative, the comfortable, the discomfort, the pleasure, the pain, the suffering, the happiness. It's all of it. Right? And so when we develop and deepen that awareness and we start seeing how, like, wow, look at how my mind reacts to this thing that I'm experiencing. Whoa, look at how my mind reacts to this other thing I'm experiencing. When I got that, and I'm talking about me in the past tense because I am here, when I got to the point of understanding those subtle little mechanisms, those subtle little sort of maneuverings that my mind does, well, then that is the condition for happiness. Right? Because you could also look at it as, again, like we said at the start here, the very baseline, the very first aspect of happiness is simply feeling more positive emotions than negative emotions, right? So even on that level, right, we could say that happiness is what our body wants to be, right? And so in many ways, it's also about just kind of removing those things that prevent us from being happy, right? But that is also part of the awareness of the mind, right? Because when we understand, like, okay, if I do this thing in this situation, my body feels this, and now I'm either clinging or I'm pushing away from that thing, depending on whether it's a good thing or a negative thing. And now I'm suffering. And in suffering, the conditions for happiness do not exist. Right? Now, that's the thing. Matthew Richard he doesn't say that he ever suffers in any of that. He says that he feels sadness. He feels that he feels pain. He feels emotional, physical, mental difficulty. But suffering is different, right? Because suffering is something that we can, we don't have to suffer with pain, right? We don't have to suffer with bad news or difficult circumstances in our lives. We do not have to suffer through it, right? Yes, we will feel pain from those things. We absolutely will feel pain from those things. We will feel sadness. We will feel a deep level of pain and sadness, perhaps. But that doesn't mean that we have to suffer, okay? Because suffering is the thing that happens when, again, either we push away from the bad thing that's happened, or the thing that we're labeling as bad, or we cling to that thing that we're labeling as good, right? It's when we do one of those two things, that's when suffering starts. Again, suffering being different from pain. There's been times where I've posted on social media about suffering and people just swarm me like the murder hornets, They're like, no, people have been raped or suffer. Yes, they have felt pain. They have felt deep pain. They have felt brutalizing and crushing pain. Absolutely. But the suffering does not have to happen. They do not have to suffer more than the pain that the actual phenomenon provided them. I hope that makes sense. I hope that discernment makes sense, okay? Because here's the thing, right? The way happiness works, as we're talking about it, right? It's the kind of conditions for happiness to exist, right? What that means, what that translates to, is that we all have this kind of baseline of happiness to which we return, right? So like, let's say you're, let's use the ice cream again, right? Like, let's say I'm walking along, I run into a friend. Hey, it's great to see you. Oh my gosh, great to see you. It's been so long. How you been? Oh, I've been great. Thanks. Nice to see you. Hey, oh, come on. My friend says, let me buy you an ice cream cone across the street. Come on, let's catch up. They have great vegan ice cream. I know you don't eat dairy. Come on, let's go. Have a quick cone with me. Let's talk. We catch up, right? It's on me. Now I'm happy, right? Something in my life just happened that made me happy, right? Like this just infused this happiness into me, right? Like I didn't do anything, but I could not even avoid being happy in this circumstance, right? Okay, so we walk across the street. I get my, whatever flavor, hopefully they have like a caramel crunch vanilla vegan ice cream. That's my jam. Maybe they have some vegan chocolate I can put on it. That would be nice, But I'm eating this ice cream and I'm feeling real happy and everything's going great. And then, like I hear a car backfire or something. I turn real quick and, oh, my ice cream fell. And even if I believed in the 3-second rule, there's a dog already slopping it up, right? So now that thing that made me happy is now gone. So now I'm going to return to the baseline of my happiness, right? And this baseline of your happiness is your subjective felt experience in the world. Right. So like when everything is just normal, right? Like nobody's, no tragedy has happened. No amazing blessing has happened. No, nothing has out of the ordinary has happened, right? It's just a Wednesday morning. You're going to work, everything's just whatever, right? In that moment, how you feel, right? That is your baseline of happiness. Because again, what we're talking about is the conditions of happiness being that place to which we return, right? After something really happy happens or after something very sad happens, right? We come back to that place, which is just neutral, right? Now, again, as we cultivate mindfulness and as we do the practices of mindfulness and compassion and we develop the emotional intelligence through this, which emotional intelligence is awareness, the ability to regulate ourselves, the ability to be motivated accurately by our emotions, right? Which comes from a clear understanding of our emotions, right? Awareness, right? Then it allows us, emotional intelligence then evolves into empathy, feeling another person, right? And then this culminates, all 4 of these key domains, as Daniel Goleman calls them, culminate in the 5th key domain, which is social skills, right? So the concept there, right, is that as I cultivate or as I understand and as I cultivate an awareness and an understanding of how all of this works, right? That's when I get to just, I get to really ground myself in a condition, in a baseline happiness, which is not static. Okay? That's the thing that I want you to know. That baseline of happiness is not static. We can raise it. We can raise it. We can raise it through the practice of mindfulness and compassion. That's what happens, right? Because again, it's not about something making us happy. It's about the understanding of how everything works that allows us to be happy. And I know that feels like, what the hell are you talking about, Art? I really do think that might be how it sounds. Because how could that be, right? Like, how could understanding my mind equal more happiness? But it does, okay? It's a mystery. There is a mysterious quality to this, right? Because there's only so much we know, even now, about the mind and about the brain and about the nervous system. And we know a lot, but neuroscientists would tell you that, no, we're pretty much, we're still definitely above the waterline of the iceberg, right? So there's a lot more that we don't know than we do know. And so what we can do is we can just rely on the experience of people who practice mindfulness, right? And when we talk to Matthew Richard, who has practiced for, I think they said 50,000 hours in his lifetime, right? Well, you know, he has a lot to say about happiness, and I think we should listen. And he's got some great TED Talks, by the way. You should check him out. He's really an amazing human being. Really beautiful words, beautiful voice, just beautiful guy. And we really just check him out. He's really amazing person. Matthew Richard, Mathieu Richard. It's French, right? So yeah, and then so not only do we listen to people like Matthew Richard, and we listen to people like Thich Nhat Hanh, and we listen to people like Jack Kornfield, and we listen to people like Ram Dass, and all of the other great, great. I was gonna say leaders, but they're not leaders, but the great teachers of this work, right? Jon Kabat-Zinn, Meng Tan, who interviewed Matthew Richard for his book Search Inside Yourself, which I have on my desk here because I was just looking something up, and I came across this passage that I underlined. I said, yes, got to talk about this. The fact that it's not a static line, right? And so anyway, yeah, we could talk about all these different people who have published stuff and done TED Talks and done programs and schools and made a whole life of studying all of this, right? Another one you should look up, pardon for the interruption, but another one you should look up is Brother David Steindl-Rast. Steindl-Rast. Amazing. He's like 90 years old, so check him out now or else you're going to be looking at him in the past. But 90-year-old guy, he's really just intense. Like he's a Franciscan monk, I believe, in 2021. Yeah. Again, really has a lot to say about how happiness works and how gratitude works and how gratitude helps happiness and compassion helps happiness. It all ties in, all the stuff that I talk about here, right? And so, yeah, we could talk about all these different famous people who have come out and said all this stuff, right? But you could also talk to me, right? Because I work with over the last, say, 4 years, I would say I have coached, I've not done the count, obviously. I'm just thinking back, 60, 80 people, something like that. Probably maybe 100 between the different groups. Yes, let's call it 100 people over the last 4 years that I've helped, cultivate this work into their lives, right? And the one thing that every single one of them, every one of them, right? There are, I shouldn't say every single one, because some of you might be watching and say, but I told you I'm not, right? So I get it. Yeah, some people still have, kind of difficulty with, certain anxiety issues or certain, trauma issues, right? Like those things don't just go away, right? They don't. Right? They stick around, right? But even those people who suffer through anxiety and stress and depression and CPTSD and childhood trauma and all those things that I work with, right? Even they, after a period of time, 12 weeks or so, there's a change. There is a true change in what they're doing. Now the people who are not suffering in trauma and anxiety and stuff, those people are like, dude, like there's nothing wrong with my life anymore. Like I don't get it, but nothing changed in my life. But yet it's all good, right? Yeah, still I don't have the job that I wish I had. I need to work on that, but it just seems like it's all like I can do this. I can do this. That's what I love to see. I love to see that. And as you know, one of the major practices that I do, and I know many of you out there watching this right now are gonna resonate with this, right? That I teach the compassion practice, right? It's a very simple practice, very beautiful practice. And by the way, one of Matthew Richard's biggest practices is compassion. So if you're looking to get to where he is with that deep ocean of happiness to which you can return, compassion practice is definitely going to be a helpful tool for you, okay? So one of the compassion practices that I teach people is to picture 3 different people in your life, right? One at a time, right? And first you start with somebody who's very easy to love, right? Like a very, a family member, a loved one, a child, one of your children, your spouse, your best friend, somebody who you think of them and it's just automatic, like, love that person, right? After that, so then you're going to, so that's a positive person, right? And so next you're going to go to a neutral person. Right now, again, you're going to do one at a time, but I'm going to list the three people first. Now you're going to go to a neutral person, right? And this neutral person is somebody who, perhaps a letter carrier in your neighborhood, right? That's what we call the postal workers in my neck of the woods here. So however you refer to them in Europe, wherever you live, or maybe it's a clerk at a store, right? You see this young kid here and there, you don't know anything about her, you literally don't know anything about her other than her name is Sandy and she, is pretty good with bleeping through the things and letting you bag your own groceries, that kind of thing, right? And then you go to a difficult person. Right. So what we do is we say the first one is positive, the second one is neutral, the third one is negative. Right. So you go to that person who elicits negative feelings in you. Right. So this is a person who's done something wrong to you. This is somebody who is but first of all, I do recommend that you start with smaller. Right. Like don't go to like your childhood abuser on the first try of this practice. Okay. That's not a good idea. Okay, you want to stay away from the trauma. Build up to that. Eventually, you'll get there. I promise you that, and that's exactly what I'm telling you here. But build up to it, right? First, start with the person who, the barista who made you a vanilla latte instead of a caramel latte, right? Like something that's like not traumatizing, right? But is like I don't like that person right now. She screwed up my coffee drink. I have this big meeting. I was really looking forward to having a good coffee and feeling good. And now I'm a little jammed up, so I don't appreciate that person because I was clear with my instructions and she made a mistake, right? It's okay to feel all that, right? Nothing wrong with that, right? But you can still feel compassion for that person. So now when each of these people, and again, one at a time, pick the first person, and what you're going to do is you're going to imagine this person, or not imagine, but just recognize, and you can even visualize it, picture, visualize, recognize that this person suffers sometime, right? And you could even, again, visualize them getting that wrong coffee and having to, go throughout their day without that coffee, right? That is a level of suffering, right? And so you can picture them going through that. And then just picture them letting go of that suffering, that they're no longer suffering, right? So picture somebody showing up to the meeting with a caramel latte for the person, right? And so you do this every day with three people. Now, you can pick the same three people if you want, or you can change it up. But here's the punchline of this whole thing, right? That and I'm talking to a single person, every single person I've taught that practice to, and it's all 100 people that have come through my work, right? Every single person I've taught this practice to, within like 2 or 3 weeks, they're calling me and they're saying, Art, I don't have anybody left for that third person. Like, I can't figure anybody out. There's nobody that bothers me anymore. And I don't know what the hell's going on. Oh, it's the best conversation. I've literally had it like dozens and dozens of times. Not all 100 people. I know that they're feeling it because it's just it's like, the 40 people who have said it have all said the exact same thing. So like, whatever. But yeah, that's how it is, right? As you keep doing this practice, you get to the point where, I can feel compassion even for somebody who does something really shitty to me. Right. And even if that is, and that's where I say eventually you get to hold your abuser in that space and you get to look at your abuser. And I don't mean to trigger anybody. OK, I'm sorry, please, but theoretically understand that it is possible for you to look at that person. Doesn't mean you're ever going to call them up and say, hey, it's okay, everything's fine, let's get together again. No. No, we're still going to protect ourselves. Right. That never goes away. For people who have experienced abuse like me, right? You must protect yourself. You must stake out your safety and you must protect that, okay? And that never changes, right? But what does change is that even from a distance, even though you'll never let that person in again, you'll never let them close enough to hurt you again, you can still feel compassion. You can still feel forgiveness. You can still feel a sense of love even. Right? You can transform the contempt that you had into love, right? Or better yet, what really happens, and again, this is where the awareness comes in, right? As we become more aware of ourselves, right, we could become more aware of the fact that, you know what, this person did some horrible things to me, right? But those horrible things are not all that person's capable of, right? Like that does not define them, right? And in reality, the actions that this person took against me that harmed me are very likely because of abuse that this person felt, right? They're operating from a place of their own trauma. And that's why this is happening, right? So now I can separate the actions of the person from the person. And that really helps. Okay, that really, really helps. And ultimately, again, what we're talking about is raising that level of happiness. You know, as a young kid, and this is exactly what Meng Ten says in his book, is that, and I share this. Well, the minute I read those words, I almost fell off my chair because, like, gosh, this is me, But as a young child, like, my default mode, my baseline level of happiness was not happy at all, right? So in the absence of something positive happening, I felt pretty sad. Right? And that's how I was for years and years and years and years, until I started doing drugs and drinking all the time and just anesthetizing myself, and just so I wouldn't have to feel anything, right? Of course, it's tied into abuse and everything else, so it's a very complicated issue that I'm working through with my therapist / coach. But the idea is, though, that now, now, if nothing's happening, I am as happy as I could possibly be. Even if something is happening, even if something really now there are moments, gotta be fully honest with you here, full disclosure, there are moments where I get triggered too, right? Where my trauma response is triggered, where my old emotions, it's in there. It's always going to be in there. And there are moments where I don't even know why, I don't know how, but it just happens, and I become disassociated, and I become, but now here's the thing, mindfulness helps me handle those rough moments too. And even though I feel a deep and heavy emotion from those times, as soon as, a couple of days go by and I'm back to my baseline of happiness, which is way up here, not way down there anymore. So I hope this inspires you to do your practice. And if you're having trouble getting into your practice, I don't know if there's anybody even listening at this point, but if there's anybody still listening or still watching, if you're having trouble getting into a daily practice, that's where a coach can really be helpful. Okay? I'm not trying to sell you something. I'm trying to help you. Okay? So I can work with finances. I can work with schedules. We can work around all kinds of things. But truly, it's if you're not able to do these practices, then none of this is going to happen for you. And I want this to happen for you. So if you're interested, there's a link in the description, which is for a link to my calendar. Okay, so you click on this link, it pops up into my calendar. You pick a date. The different times will show up on that date that show the times that I'm available. Pick the one that works for you. Enter your name, your email address, and I think answer a couple of simple questions. And now you've got an appointment booked with a coach. Okay, and this is free. I've already paid for it. Okay, I've already paid for like 300 of these sessions. Okay, so it's sitting there with your name on it. Okay, all you got to do is claim it. There's no money involved. Once you do that whole thing with the calendar, you have your appointment booked. It's a 45-minute session, which we can easily go over to an hour. Not a problem, because I book everything in hour-long blocks on my end. So 45 minutes within an hour, never a problem. Sorry, I don't know if you can see that cut on my finger. Anyway, distracting. But you can, so once you book that, now I do the rest of the work. All you have to do is show up at that point, right? And let me inspire you, let me motivate you, let me encourage you to do these simple practices. Let me help you to figure out which practice works for you. And a lot of this we can do is just this first 45-minute session. And then if you feel like you need more, well, that's what I'm here for. I can help hold you accountable, but doing it in a compassionate way, right? I hold your hand. I don't whip you, you know? And I'm telling you, if I can do this, you can do it too. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I know it went a little long, everybody. Sorry about that. I wish you well, and I'll be back in tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody. And I hope I talk to you soon. Take care.